I was delivering takeout in a wealthy neighborhood when I suddenly heard a familiar female voice laughing. That voice reminded me of my wife, Claire Jiang. At first, I thought I might be mistaken, but the red high heels at the entrance made me realize it truly was her. I stared blankly at those heels, feeling a sense of unease. After a while, a woman dressed in a seductive nightgown emerged from the room, holding a man who was shirtless and kissing him passionately. I stood outside, watching them entwined, and lost my senses, rushing inside. "Claire, is that not enough yet? You're such a tease." The man half-jokingly patted the woman's waist, causing her to let out a soft gasp. She pressed herself closer to him, as if wanting to merge with him. A blush adorned her cheeks as she looked at him seductively. Unfortunately, my partner lacks ambition. Not only is he of average appearance, but after all this time, he's still just a junior manager, and he has become even more displeasing recently. If it weren't for the fact that he always obeys me like a dog, I would have kicked him out long ago. When Claire said this, I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. It turned out that the deep feelings I had for her were viewed by her as the behavior of a dishonorable servant, one who would only follow his master's commands. She has always seen me as a dog. I clenched my fists, the veins on the back of my hands showing. The man gently brushed her nose and spun her around a few times while holding her. "If he finds out, you'll be in trouble." "So what if he does? Even if he has a lot of courage, he wouldn't dare leave me. He loves me so much," Claire said confidently. The man also began to take off his pants, preparing to put on a performance. As I got closer, the man realized that the delivery guy outside the door had not left yet. "Hey, you're not leaving? Are you trying to come in and steal something?" Claire looked up, her tone filled with sarcasm as she glanced at the delivery person. However, she couldn't finish her sentence. Her eyes widened in shock. She stared at the scene outside the door, and at that moment, her legs were wrapped around the waist of a man, a position that left her unable to explain the situation. I rushed over and kicked the man hard, knocking him down. His pants had only slipped down to his thighs, and he fell to the ground along with Claire. The scene was really quite absurd. I shot an angry look at Claire. Her body was covered with hickeys, which was surprisingly bold of her. No wonder she had always kept me at a distance and wore a long nightgown when we came back home. I always thought she had an introverted and reserved personality. Whenever I wanted to get closer to her, she would always make excuses about being too tired from work to push me away. I felt useless, unable to earn enough money to support her. In order to make more money, I started doing food delivery and considered investing in a business, working hard to be worthy of her. 2 hours ago, she told me she was working overtime and encouraged me not to wait for her and to go to sleep first. I never expected that her so-called overtime was actually spending time with someone else. I was deceived terribly. The man angrily pushed Claire away, put on his pants, and stood up with a dark expression, looking at me. Only now do I realize that he is actually my boss, Mr. Gao. Turns out my wife was having an affair with my boss behind my back. He always sent me on business trips because he wanted to get closer to my wife. After Claire was pushed away, she was momentarily stunned. After a while, she came to her senses, straightened her clothes and walked towards me. Then, she slapped me. With an angry glare, she looked at me as if I were her enemy. Despite her infidelity, she blamed me for hurting her lover. That slap shattered our 7-year marriage. The man was initially very angry, but then he suddenly smiled insidiously, as if mocking me for being cuckolded. Out of money, I see, reduced to delivering takeout. In this situation, it's no wonder Claire would look down on you. Claire was also busy inspecting his body. "Alex Gao, are you hurt somewhere?" Alex pretended to be injured and said, "It hurts here." He pointed to his chest. Claire ignored me and gently stroked Alex's chest. Alex looked at me with a challenging smile, raised his middle finger, and mockingly said, "Look, you're so useless. Your wife would rather be with me." He thought I would get angry again, but I didn't. In fact, I'm not a confrontational person. I was just provoked a moment ago. If Claire has already changed her heart, Why should I continue to cling to her? Fortunately, Alex is okay, otherwise I definitely wouldn't let you off the hook. I asked Claire. At this moment, my heart aches as if it were being cut by a knife. I want to catch my breath, but it feels like my throat is being tightly constricted. I don't understand why she has become this way. Was I not good enough to her? Yet no one can provide me with the answers. I have loved her for 7 years, accompanying her like a loyal dog and investing a lot of my energy into our relationship. But she took my deep affection as a weapon and stabbed it fiercely into my heart. As expected, she chose to leave me. 7 years of deep love resulted in nothing but indifference. John Chun, how laughable and tragic you are. Claire held Alex in her arms, looking very worried that I might act impulsively again. That scene broke my heart. I had become the villain, shattering their happiness. You've been enduring a lot, haven't you? It must be difficult for you. To avoid hindering your pursuit of happiness, let's get a divorce. I'll have a lawyer send you the divorce agreement for electronic signature. Claire tightly held Alex's hand, staring at me in shock. In the past, even though she was willful and unreasonable, I never found it in me to blame her. The 7-year marriage has made me afraid to even speak my mind, let alone consider divorce. However, Claire quickly regained her composure, a sarcastic expression spreading across her face. You want a divorce? How do you plan to live without me? Relying on a monthly salary of $10,000 or that little money you make from delivering food? John, I no longer look down on you. It's really quite disappointing that a man of 30 is still like this. Since you are eating my food, using my things, and wearing my clothes, what's wrong with being a little patient? Claire crossed her arms and looked at me with a hint of disdain in her eyes. Alex wrapped his arm around her waist and began to touch her, making Claire sigh softly. They were being openly affectionate in front of me, and I knew he was deliberately provoking me, thinking that I was powerless to do anything about it. Claire pulled a pack of cigarettes from Alex's pocket, skillfully opened the case, handed him a cigarette, and then lit it. It seemed that she did these things for him out of habit. I painfully closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Indeed, I had been a follower of Claire for 3 years without any results. Just when I was ready to give up on her and agree to my family's suggestion to study abroad for a while, with the intention of returning to take over the family business once I achieved success, Claire suddenly appeared in front of me, breathless and stopping me in my tracks. She took a moment to calm her emotions and asked me why I suddenly stopped pursuing her. She felt that this was not worthy of my feelings for her. Hearing the latter part of her sentence, I was thrilled and excitedly hugged her shoulders. Have you fallen for me? I asked. Claire shyly nodded, a blush rising on her cheeks as she avoided my gaze. Overjoyed, I lifted her up and spun her around a few times. To celebrate our time together, Claire took me to a bar to meet her friends. After Claire got drunk, she leaned on my shoulder and tearfully asked me why I was leaving her, wondering if I didn't love her enough. Alex? When I heard that unfamiliar name, I felt a tightening in my chest. Claire's friends were quite unfriendly after drinking, bluntly telling me that I wasn't as handsome as Alex and that my relationship with Claire was purely a stroke of luck. They also mentioned that if I wanted to please Claire, I would first have to get through them, or else she might break up with me. Their demands were clear. I had to buy luxury handbags. After gifting a bag, they wanted jewelry, and after that, a car. I could no longer tolerate their demands, so I had no choice but to pretend I was broke. They scolded me harshly until they reluctantly stopped at the end, and Claire did not intervene in their unreasonable behavior. She treated me with mixed emotions. She would smile at me when she was happy, but when she was upset, I felt too intimidated to approach her. To give her a stable home, I arranged for my parents to meet Claire. She said she would arrive on time, but my parents and I waited in the tea house until dark, without seeing her. I later saw on social media that she was out racing cars with her friends, having completely forgotten about our appointment. My parents were very angry, feeling that her image had been damaged. When I returned to the apartment, she was injured and crying as she apologized to me. In a moment of tenderness, I chose to forgive her. Later, when I was thinking about marriage, I invited my parents to meet Claire. I planned to publicly reveal my identity to her, but once again, she let me down. She doesn't answer calls or reply to messages. This time, my parents don't want to see her anymore. They feel she looks down on them and have forbidden me from marrying her, even though we've already obtained our marriage certificate. I find it really hard to let go of Claire. I keep making excuses for her, thinking maybe she's just really busy. But my father refuses to listen to my explanations and threatens that if I don't understand where I've gone wrong, I shouldn't come home. For the sake of Claire, I have sadly chosen to leave my home. It's been 7 years since we parted. What have I truly given for her? Maybe I'm overthinking it. Claire saw that I didn't respond to her and felt disrespected. In her anger, she picked up an ashtray and hurled it towards me, producing a loud noise. As the sound of shattering echoed, I realized it's time for the devoted one to wake up. Our fate has come to an end. I had selflessly indulged her capriciousness. Claire, I haven't used your things. I've always spent my own money. It's not that I'm incapable. I've put all my efforts into helping you. Who stayed up late to review contracts and draft project proposals for you. When you couldn't secure those big orders, it was I who took the proposal and pleaded on your behalf. They made me drink 10 bottles of wine, and I forced myself to do it for you, which ended up with me in the emergency room due to a bleeding stomach. Have you forgotten that? Claire was instantly speechless, her eyes filled with fury. Clearly, I had not earned her appreciation. It was absurd. She was the one who approached me willingly. Did I ask her to do that? No, I didn't. What she said was partly true. I had indeed been overly sentimental. I felt a deep sense of disappointment. Some people simply have cold hearts. I threw my wedding ring from my ring finger at her feet, bidding farewell to my foolish past self. I don't intend to say it a third time. Claire, I'm not telling you. I'm informing you that tomorrow I will hire a lawyer to send you an electronic divorce agreement. If you think I'm joking, just wait and see. After leaving the affluent area, I inexplicably felt a sense of relief in my heart. We have been together for so many years, but I have never been truly happy. When she struggles at work, she often loses her temper and lashes out. I have given up promotion opportunities time and again to support her quietly. She has grown from a newcomer to the sales department manager, but after achieving success, she started to become dissatisfied with me. Tonight, while I was out delivering food, I happened to see her, and that's when I discovered what she had been doing behind my back. When I got home, I received a video from Alex. The date on the video was the day I had arranged to meet her parents for the second time, but she stood me up to meet Alex, who had just returned to the country. He asked her, "Do you still love me?" She replied confidently, "Yes, I do." He then said, "But you have registered your marriage with John." She responded, "It's fine. He has my body, but he doesn't have my heart." They kissed passionately and then collapsed onto the bed together. I remember the disappointed looks in my parents' eyes that day, and the loneliness I felt while waiting in the restaurant from day until night. She always treated me like a backup, giving me some sweetness when she needed me and pushing me away when she didn't. I thought she had already gone too far, but I didn't expect that even worse things were waiting for me ahead. The next day, I returned to work. As I walked in, my colleagues kept looking at me with strange expressions. I've always been somewhat reserved, so I couldn't understand what they were thinking. It wasn't until my best colleague pulled me into the restroom and asked, "John, aren't you and Ms. Jiang married?" that I felt a tightness in my chest and finally understood the truth of the situation. Our team went to deliver the contract to her today and found her in a close embrace with Mr. Gao in the office. Now many colleagues are gossiping about you behind your back. Additionally, the project you were previously in charge of has had its credit taken by the director. Ms. Jiang told the board that it was the director who did it, and we are quite dissatisfied with this. Colleagues are still discussing it, and I have quietly left the restroom. I want to ask Claire why she would treat me this way. To complete that project, I burned the midnight oil for several nights and nearly fainted from hunger. Claire knew how much I cared about this project, as it determined whether I would get promoted. When I arrived at Claire's office, I barged in without knocking, overwhelmed by anger and humiliation. I kicked the door open and saw Claire's face flushed with embarrassment. Alex was standing beside her. I walked to the desk and coldly asked her, "Claire, why does it say that Alex worked on my project?" This was the first time I yelled at her, and she realized that she had made a mistake. She avoided my gaze, unable to look me in the eye. Why take credit for someone else's work? I continued, "This is exploiting your position for personal gain." My shout made her stop feeling guilty. She stood up in anger and retorted, "What are you shouting about? Alex is dissatisfied with his current position as director. He wants to further his career. This major project has received the endorsement of Mr. Chun, the wealthiest person in Jingcheng, and I want to help Alex achieve his aspirations." Hearing Claire's indifferent response almost made me lose my temper. Am I really going to be content with this minor managerial position? The project that I worked so hard on was taken by Alex for profit, and I really feel helpless about it. Aren't you worried that the board members will find out? Even you might get demoted, right? Haha, you might not know, but Chairman Huang is my uncle. Even if I commit tax evasion or embezzle funds, he would turn a blind eye. In this world, it's still power that speaks. You're just a small player. Even if you know we've framed you and stolen your credit, what can you do about it? Alex said triumphantly, blowing smoke in my face and even breaking into his own dance. "Claire, join us. Let's celebrate our success." Claire ignored me, laughing warmly as she embraced Alex tightly. Alex scoffed at me and said, "You can just be an audience and watch how well we dance. Soon, I'll be able to collaborate with Chun Corporation and reach the pinnacle of my career." Claire is very smart and knows that John's project capabilities are quite impressive. I truly admire him. Thanking him is a way to show that it's his privilege to be able to help you. Upon hearing those words, I felt an unprecedented anger. I couldn't restrain my impulsiveness and walked over, kicking them over. He spoke a truth. In this world, without power, no matter how hard one tries, they will be bullied by those in higher positions. That is exactly my situation right now. But they have miscalculated. I am not an ordinary insignificant person, and they have picked a fight with the wrong person. Alex realized it and quickly stood up to throw a punch at me. I had practiced martial arts since childhood, encouraged by my father to develop this skill. Alex, being pampered, was naturally no match for me. I easily dodged his attack and delivered a kick to his vital point, causing him great pain. Claire was terrified and wanted to help Alex retaliate against me. But since I no longer liked her, I turned and slapped her. This is the first time I've laid a hand on her, and she was taken aback. She covered her face, and her eyes turned red with anger as she looked at me in disbelief and said, "How dare you hit me? Are you out of your mind? Do you still want to be with me?" I understood that she was very angry right now, but there are still opportunities for promotion. It wouldn't hurt to endure it a little longer. Apologize to Alex. If he doesn't forgive you, we'll get a divorce and you can quit your job. I strongly disagreed with her plan. She actually thought she was important enough to threaten me with a divorce. Apologize to Alex? What kind of dream was she having in broad daylight? Seeing that I had no intention of apologizing, Claire angrily shouted, "Either apologize or we'll get a divorce." I finally finished dealing with everything and waved my phone in front of her. Claire looked at me with a puzzled expression. I shot her a cold glance and said, "The divorce agreement has been sent to your email. Please sign it quickly." I didn't want to waste any more time with her. Within a few seconds, I felt suffocated and weary. Claire remained silent, her indifferent gaze fixed on me. "Ms. Jiang, please don't tell me you don't want a divorce, right? What are you imagining? With someone like you? If that's the case, you should hurry up and go. It's still early. The Civil Affairs Bureau probably hasn't closed yet." After hearing this, Claire didn't hesitate. She glanced at Alex and made her decision. Then she turned to me, her expression cold. No one was afraid it was time to go. I was the first to leave the office and return to my seat. I didn't pack my things into a box like the office workers in TV dramas. Instead, I tore my important notes to shreds, determined not to leave anything for Alex. If I continued working, it would make me feel sick. So, I absolutely refused to slave away for that couple. I wanted them to experience the feeling of having nothing. Alex walked over with Claire, full of sarcasm. "Are you leaving?" I didn't respond and focused on packing my things. "If you leave here, no other company will want you. Don't come back like a dog begging for another chance." I looked up at her and reminded her that the Civil Affairs Bureau would close in an hour. Saying this comes from a good place, I truly don't want to see this couple again. My phone in my pocket vibrated, and when I took it out to check, I saw it was a call from my dad. Just seeing his name made my heart ache a little, and my eyes started to feel a bit wet. At that moment, Claire walked over and mockingly said, "Are you starting to cry now? You're the one who got divorced. I won't forgive you, so give up on that hope." At that moment, Claire regarded herself as someone important, her eyes filled with contempt for me. I ignored her and focused on the message my father had sent. He said, "Son, it's time to come home." Indeed, it was time to go home. 7 years had passed, and I had learned my lesson. Claire and I arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau, and just before signing, she suddenly asked me about the apartment located in a prime area. She said this was a compensation for the 7 years I had accompanied her, and that I should give it to her. Hearing her request, I put down my pen and sneered. The house is my premarital property, and her name is not on the title deed. Claire stood up in anger, accusing me furiously, "You don't want to give it to me? Then I will go to court and sue you. You can give it a try." I took out my phone and showed her several video clips to prove her actions. Whether it was the footage from the dashcam or the video sent by Alex, they were enough to make her lose everything. She still wanted the house, but I wouldn't give it to her, not even if I were to give it away for free. Claire stared intently at the videos, wanting to snatch the phone from my hand. "If the phone is stolen, will there be no backup? If you keep talking, I will make this incident go viral online." Alex didn't expect that I would use the video to force Claire to leave with nothing. They brought this on themselves. Even a cornered rabbit will fight back. In the end, she suppressed her anger and signed her name. After signing my name and stamping the document, my tense mood finally relaxed. As I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. 7 years of marriage had burst like a bubble. I had loved the wrong person. But I don't regret it. Everyone gets lost at some point, and what matters is being able to find the right path again. When Claire came out, she shouted at me, "John, you're not a man. You're such a loser." I quickly made her understand that I wasn't intimidated. At that moment, Alex drove up in a Ferrari, stopping abruptly in front of me, clearly trying to scare me. But I stood my ground with no sign of fear on my face. Seriously, while I was racing, he was buried in his books. Alex stepped out, holding a bouquet of vibrant roses, and sarcastically remarked, "You finally see the reality. You're not even worthy of her." Claire looked at Alex, her eyes filled with affection as she nestled into his embrace. 7 years ago, she used to look at me that way. Now, time has passed and we are no longer meant to be together. Alex had Claire wait for him in the car. After he walked away, he leaned closer to me and said with a mocking tone, "Your wife is something else." I hardly had to entice her. She just took off her clothes to serve me. I turned to take a glance at Claire in the car. She was smiling happily, and our eyes met perfectly. She shot me a fierce glare, as if warning me not to think about rekindling our relationship. I gave a cold smile in response and said to Alex, "You're quite the lucky one, cleaning up my mess. I really hope you two can lock it down and stop bothering others." Alex's face immediately fell. He was disappointed to see that I wasn't as hysterical as he had imagined. At that moment, one after another, top-of-the-line Rolls-Royces and limited edition Bugattis drove towards me, creating a stunning scene. Bystanders stopped in their tracks to watch but dared not approach. Alex was taken aback, and Claire quickly jumped out of the car. She walked over to Alex, her face filled with surprise. The convoy of luxury cars had stopped right in front of the three of us, and Claire assumed they were there to see Alex, thinking he must have the wealthiest relative among us. She never imagined they were actually looking for me. A well-dressed man in his late 40s stepped out of a Bugatti. His demeanor naturally drew the attention of those around him. Alex looked up with a determined gaze and took a few steps to greet the man, while Claire watched Alex eagerly. She was still turning back to mock me. Did you see that? I'm really glad to be away from you. I deserve a better life. In the future, my Alex will take care of me and help me live well, while you'll just have to work hard for others, and you'll never achieve anything in your life. You wouldn't even give me that rundown house, and now I don't care anymore. It can be considered a charity to you. As I watched the approaching uncle, I felt a mix of excitement and emotion. He seems to have aged quite a bit. Alex quickly ran towards him, but before he could say anything, he was kicked away by the bodyguard behind him and slammed into his Ferrari, blood instantly gushing out. This scene horrified Claire, who had just been gloating over me, full of provocative words. She jogged over and picked up Alex. "Are you okay?" she asked. Alex didn't respond, still in a state of panic. The gazes of those people were too frightening. If he continued to entangle himself with them, the consequences would be unimaginable. He felt confused. If these people weren't looking for him, then who on earth were they looking for? He instinctively glanced at me and then shook his head with self-mockery. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Uncle Fengya approaching me and greeting me. "Young master, how have you been lately? The master is waiting for you to return home." The refined uncle is my butler. He has watched me grow up since I was little, and we have a very good relationship. My eyes reddened slightly. It has been 7 years, 7 whole years since I last saw my family. For Claire, I have refused to go back. But in the end, what have I gained? Claire betrayed me, and her lover even took away my hard work. What Alex said was indeed true. Without power, one can only be bullied by cunning people. When the butler referred to me as young master, both Claire and Alex were astonished, their eyes wide with disbelief. They could never have imagined that the poor kid they looked down on would turn out to be the noble heir they both admired. They must be thinking to themselves, "This is impossible, it must be fake, or John hired an actor to perform." His words angered the butler. The butler gave the bodyguard a look, and the bodyguard understood. He walked up to Alex and delivered a kick to his mouth, sending several teeth flying. "My young master is someone a commoner like you could never touch. By the way you're talking, it seems you've bullied him quite often, haven't you?" The butler narrowed his eyes, glaring at Alex like an angry leopard. Alex was so frightened that he lost control and wet his pants. Claire was stunned by the young master's shout and remained unresponsive for a long time. She looked at me in confusion, her face growing increasingly pale, completely ignoring Alex calling her name. I walked over to Alex and looked down at him. "Soon you will understand who you have provoked. I will make you regret it." With that said, I left without looking back. Claire stood up, staring blankly as I got into that limited edition Bugatti. Confusion, frustration, and unwillingness were etched on her face. I knew she was watching me, but I didn't turn around to look at her. I started the sports car, feeling like a wild leopard, thinking that I needed to make her understand what a loss it would be to let me go. It seemed that after being infatuated with someone as insidious as Alex for so many years, her judgment was truly questionable. When I got home, I saw my mother waiting for me at the door. Her eyes were slightly red, as if she had been crying. As soon as I got out of the car, she hurried over and embraced me, while my father stood behind her with a serious expression. I expressed my concern for her a few times, and my father decided to step back, allowing me to take charge of the company. He had been quietly observing me for years, and I had known about it all along. To avoid disappointing him, I took on that major project. I wanted to prove to him that I was capable, but Claire forcibly handed my chungwa to Alex and even received my father's praise. He knew how much I had struggled but chose not to help me, only encouraging me to reflect on my own. He often said that one must endure hardships to truly rise above others. Under my father's guidance, I successfully took over the Chun family business in front of many shareholders. After his retirement, he went on a world tour with my mother. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling window of the tallest pyramid-shaped building in the city, I leisurely smoked a cigarette. After a while, there was a knock at the door, and upon my permission, a well-dressed female secretary entered. She said that the project manager from Leap Company had arrived. With smoke swirling around, I gazed out the window at the eagles soaring freely in the sky. They had finally come, right in front of them. I gestured to the secretary to let the two of them in. The red high heels clicked softly on the floor as Claire walked in, dressed in a sexy outfit with bold makeup. Alex lost a few teeth in an accident and has had porcelain crowns installed. He is dressed in luxurious attire, standing respectfully beside Claire with his head slightly bowed. The company, Feyue, was where I used to work, and receiving recognition from the billionaire Mr. Chun is truly a great honor. Such acknowledgement can help the company endure in a fierce competitive environment and eventually reach its peak. I am standing with my back to them, so they cannot see my expression. Alex held the project contract in his hand, just a step away from success. Claire gently nudged Alex with her elbow, suggesting that it was time for him to speak up. While he had been arrogant and rude at his previous company, Alex was now cautious and careful at Chun Family Enterprises. He took a deep breath and smiled as he said, "Mr. Chun, this is the project contract I brought personally for your review." After speaking, he exchanged a look with Claire, excitement evident in their eyes. In their excited gazes, I slowly turned around. When they saw me, the excitement they had just moments ago vanished in an instant. The atmosphere became tense, and no one spoke. Claire's smile turned into one of terror, and Alex's expression mirrored hers. They were completely unprepared to find out that the admired billionaire was, in fact, me. I shot them a lung-lunged glance. My arms crossed over my chest. Alex's expression was quite amusing. At times he looked pale, and at other times he seemed to tremble slightly. Claire kept muttering to herself, seemingly unable to accept the reality. But I knew his true situation better than anyone. How could he, a clear pauper, possibly be the heir of the Chin family? They looked to the secretary, hoping for an answer. The secretary angrily reprimanded them for being so bold as to question Mr. Chun. As soon as she uttered those words, they immediately lost their balance and fell to the ground. No, John, I'm just a small player here. Don't take it out on me. Just treat me like a breeze and let me go." Alex was trembling on the ground at that moment. He was completely different from the person who had taken credit for my work earlier. Claire looked at me in astonishment, her eyes filled with shock. She sat down weakly, clearly unable to accept everything happening before her. I asked him who was responsible for the project, and I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Alex quickly admitted that it was Mr. Chen's fault, saying that he shouldn't have taken what belonged to someone else and expressing his helplessness and regret about it. After he finished speaking, I couldn't help but kick him. Hearing him say that made me feel that if I were just an ordinary worker, I might not even have the courage to resist. Because of people like her, many companies overlook talented individuals, preventing them from showcasing their abilities. Alex returned to my side in pain. He knew what I wanted to ask, and I hoped Claire would hear his true feelings. Alex had once tried to seduce me, even though I had a girlfriend and he was married, disregarding morality to approach me. Many men find it hard to resist temptation and always want to seize the opportunity when it arises. People like her are no different from women on the streets, and Mr. Chun shouldn't feel sad about her. Claire was stunned into silence when she heard Alex's comments about her. Alex continued to say that if it weren't for the valuable apartment she held, which would benefit his career, he wouldn't have considered her at all. This time, Claire didn't stay silent. She stood up and started hitting Alex furiously. She angrily exclaimed, "You clearly came back to find me, yet you claimed that leaving me all those years ago was unavoidable, making me believe your lies. You knew I was already married, yet you got me drunk and took me to a hotel. You were only pretending to care about me for your own purposes." Alex wouldn't treat her the way I did. He would just grab one of her legs and throw her out. Claire, who had been pampered all her life, was left in pain and spat out blood from the fall. She looked at Alex, feeling both angry and afraid. Once a loving couple, they had now turned into bitter enemies, engaging in a fierce struggle. Alex grabbed Claire's hair, and every time she yelled at him, he would slap her hard. Claire called out to me for help, saying, "John, please save me, I realize I was wrong." I sat at my desk, a cold smile appearing on my lips. I had said this before, she would ultimately regret it. The two of them fought for a long time until Claire picked up a pen from the desk and jabbed it at Alex. Alex was in excruciating pain, blood seeping through his pants, and I knew he could not recover. Ha ha ha, this is the punishment for his betrayal against me. Claire was severely injured, her eyes displaying a desire for forgiveness, but I ignored her, treating her as a stranger. I signaled to my secretary to call the police, having already gathered evidence of Alex's wrongdoing at Leap Corporation. When the police arrived, Claire was also taken away for intentional injury. She tried to grab my foot, pleading for me to save her. The bodyguard stepped forward to pry her hands away, while the secretary brought me tissues to wipe away the spot she had just touched. Claire understood that the man who once deeply loved her would never return. Tears streamed down her face, and her heart was filled with guilt and regret. At that moment, she could no longer focus on any of it. When she was taken to the door, she suddenly shouted, "I'm sorry. I know this may not mean much to you, but I am sincere. If I had introduced you to my parents earlier and hadn't acted selfishly out of love, perhaps we could have made it to the end together. Right?" I didn't directly answer Claire's question because in this world, there are no ifs. I never make assumptions. Claire, unable to get a response from me, stopped struggling, her heart filled with despair as the police escorted her out. Meanwhile, Alex fell into a deep coma due to excessive blood loss, and even after waking up, he would still be unable to escape legal consequences. As for me, I will lead the Chen family to the pinnacle of success.